if you can sit on your ass and be satisfied doing nothing, you can be satisfied doing anything. So you no longer need the phone for your fix. You no longer need the drugs for your fix. You no longer need the junk food for your fix. You're good as you are. And this is the basic shape of what's been going on for 2,500 years now.
Today's guest, Dan Goldfield, is a mindfulness and business coach from the UK who went from being a professional drummer to studying with a monk for 5 years and now coaches people through mindfulness and wealth creation techniques and tools. Conversation explores his journey into mindfulness and the spiritual practice, the concept of retirement and building a purpose-based business, the integration of mindfulness and wealth building, overcoming skepticism about personal branding and online presences, and his views on mainstream education and the importance of curiosity. If you haven't already, please give this episode a like, subscribe, and a rating. It helps us more than you could imagine. It allows us to go up in the rankings and therefore be seen by more people, allowing us to get better guests. And we are now on a journey to 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love your help to get there. Enjoy. Quickly though, I'd like to chat about our sponsor, VitaDrop. VitaDrop is an Australian-based hydration and supplement company that has 4 amazing products, one of which I try to take every night before bed, a magnesium sleep sachet. The first time I took this sleep sachet, I woke up the next morning with a 30% jump on my REM sleep, which was recorded on my Whoop, and I thought it was a typo. It has improved the sleep of both myself and people that I've recommended it to so much that I had one friend say to me, and this is word for word, "Mate, VitaDrop is life-changing. I spent 7 hours straight asleep for the first time in 10 years, 3 nights in a row, and I can't believe it." They're also not a one-trick pony. They have a bunch of different drinks for different purposes, including a general hydration drink, a focus drink, which I have here, that can replace your morning coffee, and a collagen supplement. So if you're interested, use the code TOT for 25% off your next order. It helps you with a discount and it helps us allow the podcast to continue. So I think that's a win-win in my books. Now back to the episode. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, my friend. Good to be here with you.
It's good to have you here. I have come across a bit of your content over the last 6 months, and I really love the energy that you put out. I feel like the way that you communicate on camera and the way that you speak, but you speak about very deep, sometimes esoteric things, but I like that you are bringing it into a clear, simple, and concise way of communicating, which I think is extremely important for anyone going on a spiritual journey, to not get lost in the source. So keep doing that.
Thank you, brother. That's such an important thing for me to hear, because it's at the center of what I'm trying to do. When I came to this journey, I had to go into all kinds of spiritual traditions with their archaic teachings and then make sense of a bunch of terminology. It was a whole layer of learning that I wanted to see if I could do away with for people. Mm-hmm. Also, social media being the way it is, no one wants to hear Buddhist terminology on the For You, right? Mm-hmm. It's that layer of inaccessibility that I kind of made a hypothesis. Like, can we maintain the essence of these wisdom teachings in plain language? So that's been really something that I've put a lot of effort into. So it's great to hear that back, my man.
Of course. Well, on that note, I'd love to get a bit of an elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and how you're contributing to the world. What would that sound like?
Sure. So my name's Dan Goldfield. I am attempting to normalize well-being for 1,000,000,001 people. 1,000,000,001 because then I can say I've helped over 1 billion people.
Are you going to stop after 1 billion?
I will likely be dead by the time I help 1 billion people. It's kind of a legacy thing, right? I was just posting about my 50-year plan, which is all aimed at that. Now, we were just talking about Buddhist terminology, right? In Buddhist terminology, this is called the Bodhisattva ideal. A Bodhisattva is someone who essentially tries to help people in the deepest way possible, as many people as possible, as deeply as possible. And my take on how we need to do that in the 21st century is that I think we need to look at how we're educating children. So my big plan is to eventually guide parents and prospective parents to their own realization of deep, effortless, circumstance-independent well-being, and then train them to homeschool their children with that as the fundamental basis for the education. That way, if we can do that, we circumvent all of the issues that we all arrive at adulthood with. So those children won't have to spend so long straightening themselves out and therefore can get right back into helping people. And so to me, this is how we're going to build some momentum and build our utopia. So that's the big plan, brother. Currently, I'm helping people just get themselves straight, teaching them mindfulness as a basis for addressing all of the issues in their life, because the mindfulness thing really is comprehensive. Wherever we look at a genuine spiritual teaching, it must include the whole of the individual. Everything that they encounter comes along for the ride. All of their perspectives, all of their ideas, all of their beliefs. These must all be examined. And so I end up talking with clients about everything that's going on in their lives, from their self-awareness, first and foremost, to their habits, to their health, to their relationships, to their work, all of it. So that's what I'm doing right now. This is how I'll build up to the point where I'm able to start working at a larger scale. And that's when I'll start thinking about building something for the kids.
Okay. And that's a very ambitious goal. What led you here? Why are you wanting to do this for over a billion people? And what part of your early years led you to make such a major life goal begin to be manifest?
Well, it was my own confusion, brother, that led me to a point of desperation for which mindfulness was the cure. Famous teacher named Thich Nhat Hanh taught no mud, no lotus. Is one of my favorite one-liners from Thich Nhat Hanh. No mud, no lotus, so that it's by our own suffering that we arrive at the place from which we're finally able to turn around and help others. Now, the reason for this ambitious goal is, believe it or not, the 1 billion number is actually a backstep. Really, the wish is to help all beings realize effortless well-being. Now, this is just the plain language for what is called enlightenment, what is called awakening. I wanted to put a number on it because one of the things that I discovered coming to social media was that what I was talking about and what I was offering was intangible, where people need something to grab onto, an idea at least. So to put a number on it seemed wise. And certainly enough people have come back to me and said good things about that bio of mine. This features in all my social media bios. People seem to quite like it. So that's where the ambition is coming from. Although at a deeper level, this is a manifestation of the natural wish to do good, which millions of practitioners have found to be the only game in town. Once they get themselves straight, I mean, what else is there to do? We can sit and hang out. I became very happy on my own. Could have just kind of ridden off into the sunset and taken my own happiness with me. But I was talking to a friend who was another advanced practitioner. We would talk on the phone a lot. And he said to me one day, look, why don't you just talk about what we talk about online? I'd been living in relative silence for some time, dealing with the profound difficulty of really expressing what I'd realized for myself, the true nature of the human being, the true mechanics of happiness and how it really works. But then after this friend encouraged me to start sharing online, I thought, isn't it better to try? Even if this is ultimately inexplicable, even if it can't really be put into words, isn't it better to try? And if one person just gets a little pointer, then it's worth it. Now, another famous teacher named Adyashanti said that when it comes to explaining this stuff, spirituality in its broadest sense, he said, my job is to fail well when it comes to explaining this stuff. He said it can't be explained because as soon as we make an explanation, we're using words, and words are dualistic by their nature. We're cutting up reality into pieces when we use words. And that's the opposite direction that we want to go in genuine spirituality. We're looking for that sweet oneness, right? So he said, all I can do is fail well, but if I can point someone in the right direction, then I'm happy and it was worthwhile. So I took up that attitude and came out here online.
Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome to the game.
Thanks.
It's a tough one to try and explain the depth of the human experience in a crude mode such as words, because even at the best of times, the interpretation of that wording internally and externally are very different. So how have you found that challenge?
Oh, in the beginning, it was deeply concerning to me. I had lots of experiences, like so many practitioners do, Adam, of trying to explain the changes that were going on to those who were dearest to them and making an absolute mess of that effort, and just ending up misunderstood by everyone around me. So that was where it started. So I can remember a line from my teacher's teacher. This is a famous Thai monk named Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. He said that spiritual practice is about making the mind fit for work. Now, he was talking about a very specific kind of work. He was talking about spiritual work. Well, I shared this line with my father one time, thinking he'd like it. My father's a worldly man by his own description, with a lot of worldly wisdom, worked very, very hard throughout his life and was always frustrated at my what should we say, rebellious wishes to first be a musician and then study Alexander technique and then study mindfulness and then start an online business. So deep in the throes of my mindfulness practice, I shared this line with my father that what I'm doing is making the mind fit for work. And well, he had very little reaction at all. I mean, I think it just confused the poor man. Now, I'm pleased to report that I've reconciled all of this with my father. We have a wonderful relationship these days. But in the depths of that practice, he really felt like he'd lost me before I went off to retreat in Thailand. He and my stepmother expressed some deep concerns. I was actually fantasizing about ordaining as a monk at the time, which would have meant I might never have seen them again. Now, that's concerning for any parent, right? But also I'm floating these ideas. I'm trying to express these ideas in ways that they will understand. But what I'm studying, what I'm practicing, the changes that are going on inside myself are so far outside of any context within Western culture that I would have been better off waiting until I understood it better and then having those conversations later on, right? As that journey continued, I practiced and practiced and practiced how to explain this stuff, not only in plain language, but in terms that Westerners would understand and even resonate with. Most importantly, highlighting the benefits of these practices, again in plain language, and highlighting the escapes that are made from all the problems, stresses, and trials that we're so familiar with in modern life. So as my understanding developed, this was one of my favorite developments, was to be able to express this stuff in plain language in ways that ordinary people could understand.
Okay. And on that note, what is mindfulness to you?
Mindfulness is clear seeing.
What does that
That's how
mean?
I like to define it. Being able to look at something without bias, without judgment, without description, without label, without even interpretation, to see it just as it appears, with no preference about it, no trying to pull it towards or trying to push it away, just witnessing it, observing it precisely as it appears. That's the game of mindfulness.
Does that mean you're possibly not processing the information? What does that feel like when you feel like you're in that moment?
Well, the good news is that we always retain the option of interpreting, of judging, of labeling, describing. We rather demote these to the position of tools as opposed to them being reactions. So how does it feel? Well, early on in the journey for someone, it feels liberating because a lot of our judgments, interpretations, descriptions, they hurt.
I mean, sorry, just specifically physically on a physical, like
physically.
What is that feeling? What is that feeling? Just so the goal here is to try and get somebody listening to understand when they've hit a point where they're actually potentially being genuinely mindful.
I see. It's more likely to be experienced as a mental thing, though there can be an emotional component of relief. So it might be experienced in physical terms. It might be experienced as a lightness. It might be, some people experience tingling. For me, it was always more of a mental thing because that was where I was causing my problems. Although, that said, it was chronic pain that really brought me to the practice. That was easing off very gradually over a period of years. But the moments where I really felt like, oh, okay, I'm getting the hang of this in terms of mindfulness, it was a mental, emotional relief. Lightness is a good word. The feeling, I suppose, of letting go, although again, that for me was more in the mind. Trying to recall, were there physical sensations along with that? Not so much, not for me. Some people report wild experiences that can be called kundalini, energy stuff going on in the body. I never had any of that go on. But it was this gradual march toward freedom, or to say it more accurately, it was a dissolving of all of the mental habits that had caused me stress, anxiety, worry, doubt, fear. Those were the releases for me. Does that quite answer the question?
However it comes out, it's a tough one, as we spoke about earlier, to really get to the core of it. But yeah, if that's where it lands, that's where it lands. So, and what you're saying is the process of mindfulness at the core dissolved most of your life concerns. So do you live in a state of bliss, or how does this work on a specific basis?
Yeah. So the best way I could describe my life is it's wonderfully easy.
So we're making it harder than we need to make it just by default?
I was making life thousands of times harder than it is for me now. And we've just kind of walked through what that was like in terms of a contrast inwardly. Outwardly, the reflection is the circumstances of my life are really simple these days. And that's by design. I have a zero tolerance policy for drama or gossip in my life. I'm just not in the places where that's happening. I keep very few relationships. The ones that I do keep are wholesome. My relationship with my wife is perfect. She's an incredible partner, and our relationship being founded on these teachings is why it's so strong. So ease is an enormous factor in my life. Bliss is a word that's interesting. When we look at some of the teachings around that word, they can be best expressed like this, with the line, happiness doesn't flash, it glows. Real happiness. So I remember thinking, hey, if I get enlightened, it will be like being on ecstasy all the time. Now, what's interesting is it kind of is like that, but I'm not high, right? Because if you're high all the time, you're not high anymore, right? The high is experienced in contrast. What I can tell you is early experiences with MDMA for me were transformative and led me to a hypothesis. Could I be this happy all the time? Could I be this empathic all the time? Could I be this open all the time? The last couple of times I ever experimented with that drug, not much changed. There was a body high, but that happiness, general sense of things being well was right there. That openness was right there. That empathy was right there. So that actually it rather felt more to me like, oh, the people around me at the party are finally ready to have the kind of conversations that I want to have all the time.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So there are some interesting studies that have been done that would show you that advanced spiritual practitioners would typically rate higher on serotonin, on oxytocin, on all of those good chemicals, if you like, and also in alpha waves, which are the brain waves associated with novelty. So the way Mingyo Rinpoche described it in his book was, he said it's the brain wave that's released when you take the first bite of a fresh, crunchy apple. Right? Now, of course, this is significant to us in 2024, right? Because everyone's chasing that novelty all the time, and we've been given these artificial sources of novelty, which are never ending. And what does that mean? When we put the phone down, now the brain's going, where's my next hit? Where's my next hit? Where's my next hit? Right? Mindfulness and meditation, of course, train us in the manner of, if you can sit on your ass and be satisfied doing nothing, you can be satisfied doing anything. Right? So you no longer need the phone for your fix. You no longer need the drugs for your fix. You no longer need the junk food for your fix. You're good as you are. And this is the basic shape of what's been going on for 2,500 years now.
The drug thing's an interesting one. I remember watching a video from, I think it was Sadhguru, and he was talking about why he doesn't do drugs. And his explanation was, he said, I'm up here all the time. If I do a drug, it brings me to here. I don't want to come down to here. But he then said, I also understand if you're here and then you do a drug or a drink alcohol and it brings you up to here, you're going to want to do that.
Yeah.
And I haven't drunk alcohol in a couple of years now.
Great.
And I rarely do drugs. I'm very specific in what I do and when I do it and how I do it. And when I explain to my friends, they, let's just say, New York is a pretty crazy city. People like to partake in, say, cocaine and drink a bit. And when I say I don't have any interest in any of that sort of stuff, and they say to me, wow, like I couldn't do that, I explain that exact process. It's like, this is not because I have great willpower. I genuinely feel less happy like in the process of doing this. So it's an easy cut.
That's
chocolate though.
Yeah, the monks have a soft spot for chocolate too.
Oh,
yeah,
that shit's great.
Yeah, and a lot healthier than cocaine.
Some depends on the chocolate. I'm going down the 100% dark chocolate route at the moment. I think.
Ooh, yeah, hardcore.
It's basically dirt, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something good while also treating myself. So that's where we've landed. So
I love it, brother.
You mentioned briefly that you have, spiritual practices to get in the position to do spiritual work. What is spiritual work?
For me as a teacher or for someone as a practitioner?
Both.
Okay. So for me as a practitioner, which is of course where I started, it was about clearing up unexamined beliefs, assumptions, biases that were leading me to cause myself all that trouble, all the stress that I was holding myself in, the anxiety, the doubt, the worry, endless self-referential thought, all of the ways in which modern people tyrannize themselves. Essentially, it was about learning to stop being dissatisfied. And I choose my words carefully here. Genuine spirituality is always in the negative. It's a subtractive process. If we're trying to add to ourselves, we're like a dog chasing its tail, because maybe we'll get into this in the deeper teachings. It's realized there is no self. There is no permanent entity that is unchanging to whom qualities can be added. Now, I spent a long time in teachings which made that submission. That
kind of went over my head. Sorry. Say that one more time and maybe elaborate on it for a moment.
Absolutely, brother. Yeah, we're in some deep territory here. It's good to double click on this stuff. I spent the first part of my journey in what we could call additive spiritual practices, which are not too different to lots of practices that people find themselves in elsewhere. Meaning, I'm trying to add something to myself. I'm trying to improve myself in some way. I'm unhappy, therefore I need to add happiness to myself. I need to develop a skill to make myself more happy. Or I'm anxious, so I need to develop a skill to become more self-confident, right? If my anxiety is of the social variety. The issue with this is that in the deeper teachings, in the deeper practices, it's taught and realized that there is no permanent entity that we can point to that is the storehouse of all of these qualities. Rather, it seemed that we're in a constant state of flux. Stuff appears, stuff disappears. There seems to be a consistent timeline, but only for as long as we remember it. So actually, the story of us, this permanent entity to whom we think life is happening, is entirely dependent upon memory and tends to change, right? A great demonstration of this is, someone asks you, who are you? Well, largely it depends who you're talking to as to what you say. So we're all far more multifaceted, complex, and ever-changing than we would like to think. Now, I've got to try to keep the thread here because we're going really deep. This isn't to say that we have to abandon using words like I, me, or mine. This isn't to say that we're going to vanish into a cloud of smoke and disappear from the material plane. Rather, it's seeing that what we call ego, what we call personality, and this assumption that we have that there is a permanent entity here who can be changed, who can be manipulated, is just a way of thinking. It's a convenient way of thinking. It enables us to do what we're doing right now, right? Say, I'm Dan, this is Adam, right? We're going to have a conversation. We need to be able to do that. We want to be able to do that. It's good for us, right? But on the deeper level, it's also very, very good for us to see actually that which I call Dan is something which I experience. When I use the word me, when I use the word I, when I use the word to a lesser extent mine. What I'm actually talking about is awareness. But what I call Dan, the body, the thoughts, the feelings, the memories, the characteristics, those are all appearances that come and go. And actually the common ingredient among all of those experiences is awareness. And this is the root spiritual teaching at the base of all other spiritual teachings, is who are we? What are we? And that our true nature is simple awareness.
So who are you?
Well, when you ask me and we're having a conversation, I will tell you I'm Dan, right? Now, I would have
What
gone
about if you're asking yourself?
Yeah, well, indeed. When asking myself, there's really nothing there. Now, this was the subject of long inquiry, and this is a deep, deep practice in many spiritual traditions, which we can correlate, right? We can look at, the Advaita Vedanta tradition did this in India, and the Zen tradition did this kind of self-inquiry. The Taoists did this kind of self-inquiry. The Dzogchen teaching in Tibet asks this question, what is our true nature? And when we really look and keep looking and keep looking and keep looking, we can't find anything that we can reliably call me, myself, because it keeps changing. Now, you might say, well, I'm the aggregate of all of those things.
The average.
Okay,
Yeah.
right? Okay, fine.
The monthly
That's great.
average.
Yeah, right? That's convenient. That gives us something to write in our Twitter bio, right? Fantastic.
Who am I? The monthly average of all of my personalities. That's
good.
Great. Yeah, that is great.
We've got a dating profile as well. It'd be a good conversation starter, right? But indeed, it's being able to hold those two levels at once, right? There is the social level on which, right, we don't need to become some kind of freak weirdo because we do spiritual practices and say, I'm not Dan. I'm going to be like that 14th century Tibetan master and call myself pure space. I mean, that's
not a bad DJ name, to be honest.
It's a great DJ name, right? Little psytrance. That could be interesting. And again, might work well as a social media campaign, right? But also, we can just say, I'm Dan, right? On the relative level, this is who I am, right? And I have these memories of what I did yesterday and last week and last month, right? Sure, they change a bit and they become less and less stable as I age, but that, we can paint this picture, we can tell this story, this narrative in time. But it's also then that other level of in those quiet moments when you ask yourself, in my direct experience, without thinking, without telling a story, who am I? And it turns out that when we keep asking ourselves that question, we discover I am the space in which all of this happens. It's the only answer that makes sense in the end.
That's a wild premise. I don't really understand what to do with that information right now.
This is usually the kind of thing that requires many, many conversations over many, many years and an awful lot of practice. To
What kind
test
of practice?
these kinds of, to just look again and again and again. The most profound spiritual instruction I ever came across was from the Tibetans, and that instruction is to rest naturally without seeking or describing anything. If we were to make that our only practice, then we would discover everything we need to discover. And at the end of those discoveries would be that peace, that effortless well-being, otherwise known as awakening enlightenment, where everything does indeed become light. It's what enlightenment means in one way of speaking about it. Everything becomes light, everything becomes easy. The issue with that instruction is it's too simple for most of us in the 21st century, right? So I don't see many beginners these days, but if I did, I likely wouldn't start with that instruction. I would assess them in conversation, and maybe if I felt that they were open to it. Maybe I would start there. Maybe I would start instead with a more tangible practice like meditation, for example. Right? But the reason this instruction to rest naturally without seeking or describing anything is really the ultimate spiritual instruction is because what are we doing when we meditate anyway? Well, we might be doing some kind of additive spiritual practice saying, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to make myself better. Well, that doesn't sound too different to what we're trying to do in the world, right? I'm going to get more money. I'm going to get more status. I'm going to get more, be more. And that's what's going to make me happy. It's more refined than that. It's more refined than acquiring physical goods, but it's still based in dissatisfaction. I must change myself in order to be okay. When I came across the hypothesis that's put forward by the subtractive spiritual practices and teachings, who say, no, you've got it backwards. It's not that you're born broken and then have to do a bunch of practice to fix yourself. You're born perfect. Then you were twisted out of shape by the thinking mind, or so you think, that there's this appearance of all of these problems, but actually they're empty. And when you simply relax and accept and let go again and again and again, see what the mind throws up. Oh, well, I can relax with that. Oh, I can accept that. Right? This leads us back to our true nature time and time again. Now, the issue then is, myself included, everyone said, well, I can't possibly accept this. Look at this social anxiety that I'm experiencing. I can't possibly accept this. I must have to do something about it. And we're missing the whole time that the social anxiety itself is the doing that's causing the problem. So in the West in particular, though more and more as time goes on in the East as well, we have this enormous bias toward doing. We don't value non-doing in our culture. We don't value rest and relaxation. We don't value stopping as an antidote to things.
Why do you think that is?
We like stuff. I have a theory here, actually, which I doubt we'll ever be able to prove, but I was chatting with a friend one time. We were talking about the broad history of spirituality. And we came to, why is it, do you think, that the Westerners ended up so materially driven whilst the Easterners were more spiritual? And I was sat there in this cafe with this friend of mine, and I said, you don't think it could be as simple as the weather? In the West, it's cold, mostly, right? Colder than in the East. So, there's some cold climates in the East, but if we imagine India, where Buddhism came from, right? India's perfect for sitting under a tree in the shade.
Thailand,
Sri Lanka,
Indonesia.
Right? Indonesia, yeah. All of these places where these spiritual teachings came from. Now, of course, there were cold climates where spiritual practice was being done as well, but largely we could say the East was more conducive to spiritual practice in terms of its climate than the West. Certainly, if we look at England, where I'm sat right now, as the largest empire the world has ever seen, it was a lot about gathering firewood here in the early days, right? If you didn't have that firewood, you were kind of fucked. Even in the summer, it gets kind of cold, right? If you didn't stockpile that food, you were kind of fucked. So our whole culture grew around the gathering of resources. You can kind of see then how the differences in philosophy may have sprung up there.
What about Spain?
Yeah, certainly there are some warmer climates in Europe. That's true. So maybe that's the
only one though. The rest are pretty cold, but Spain's the only one. That Spain and Portugal are the only
Spain,
couple
Portugal, south of France, Greece. There are a handful of warmer countries and really nice climates. It's the Mediterranean, right? So maybe that's where my theory falls over. But it's an interesting one, right? Why did right? Why did these theories, these philosophies, these practices come from the East? Why are they more geared toward non-doing, where in the West we tend to be more about doing? It's interesting, hey?
Well, I find it funny you're talking about this theory, because I have a very similar theory, but for something else. So that's why I instantly went to the Mediterranean parts of Europe. But actually, to be fair, maybe it's not so spiritual, but many of the blue zones fit around the Mediterranean countries.
Blue
So,
zone.
like the blue zones, the blue zones are basically pockets of the world where there's the highest median age of people. So people live the longest. And a lot of them are in these Mediterranean pockets.
Right, I've heard
and
that.
And a big part of this is the community element, the like eating together, and a lot of activity, and a lot of kind of community and rest and fun. So maybe it hasn't manifested in the spiritual teachings, but it's manifested in a long life in another way.
Very interesting.
It is. The theory that I've come across is that you look at not all, but a big portion of the creative output in the world and the depth of culture, and it comes from countries with terrible winters.
Interesting, right?
You think Amsterdam, I'm just going to rattle off a few. Amsterdam, Germany, Paris, New York, London, all of these places with just hellish winters have an amazing depth of culture and art and creativity flowing through it, because everyone's stuck inside having a shit one for 4 months. And all they get to do is reflect and bubble any ideas to the surface to stay sane. And then they come out in the summer and they go, Rah!
Yeah. Although again then, right, to go the other way, this is super interesting. If you go even colder, then you don't get that same.
Too cold.
Exactly.
Too cold.
Yeah. They're cold all fucking year. And then again, we're back to like, it really is firewood all the fucking time. Yeah. Super interesting, right?
We might be onto something here.
We might. I don't know how we'd ever study this, but
I'm sure there's a way.
Yeah, it's there.
I want to get your thoughts on another note. You made a mention of MDMA. Have you done much in the psychedelic space, and what's the value of psychedelics to the spiritual practice in your mind?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. And my feeling is that they're useful for showing us parts of ourselves that we're unaware of, in a way of speaking. The issue is, of course, the bad trip. There's always that potential that someone comes to it unprepared or takes too much. Or, I mean, the issue with these substances being illegal in so many places is precisely that people don't know what they're taking a lot of the time. Right?
Yeah.
They're often in the wrong environment, surrounded by the wrong people, etc., etc. Of course, the nature of the experience changes completely when it's in a therapeutic setting. So I think they're a useful tool. What I also say anytime I have this conversation is I don't think they're necessary. I think that a genuine spiritual practice will do for you at least as much as a good psychedelic experience. I think there are also a lot of distractions in the psychedelic experience. Now, there are distractions in the meditative experience. People might have a mystical experience in meditation and think it's super significant. Oh, I met God, or I had this crazy vision, or whatever. Oh, I've got magical powers now, right? Well, all of this is just more stuff, right? When what we're really after is that effortless well-being, that profound okayness, which is what we're all about. And then, of course, turning around and helping others. What other game is there, right? sure, have your mystical experience, but what does that do for anyone else? You know?
I mean, you might have just lost blood flow for a while.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, right. And it does get really confusing. The data is totally bastardized whenever a psychedelic substance is in the mix, because is it something of the nature of your own mind, or is it the substance that did it to you? Right? Now, we could talk about that line's kind of blurry, and it's like, well, yeah, you took a substance, but it is all your mind that's showing you this stuff. It's like, yeah, but, you know, you can have bad food and start hallucinating. So it always makes things more tricky. I decided at some point, and I never did a crazy amount of psychedelics, but I did experiment. I decided at some point that I wanted for the data to not be bastardized. I wanted to know that what I was seeing, what I was learning, what I was realizing was all raw data, unaffected by any outside substance.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that fully. I want to make a comment on the psychedelic experience and the bad trip. The interesting thing that I've found is I get feedback from a lot of people that haven't done a psychedelic experience, and their first thought is, no, I need to be in control, and I'm, you know, it's bad for me because I can't let go. And I've explored this a number of times in a number of different settings, many of which solo, many of which with a large amount. You know, I've experienced this quite a lot, and to date, touch wood, but I have not had a bad trip. And I think what it is when I start the trip, I say to myself, what will come, and I will be okay with good, bad, ugly, happy, angry. I'm just going to go with it.
Huge.
And in the process of doing that, you know, there's been moments in time where maybe some like challenging emotion has come up, and there's a choice in that moment in time to fight it or to flow with it. And so far, every time I've flowed with it, and it's not led to a bad trip. So I think maybe there's a lot in just the process of accepting and knowing that it will be challenging at times, and just going with that.
Yeah.
So,
now, you've actually just described the whole of spiritual practice. Right? It's true when we're just doing the hallucination we call life. Equally so.
I do also like this idea of raw data, because I've noticed since I've stopped drinking as well, there's less for me to have to check off to determine when I'm feeling not great. There's just less things I'm doing. So therefore, if there's something off, I don't have 5 or 6 more reasons why it might be off.
Right.
I can go, I slept like shit. Why did I sleep like shit? I ate late. Great, done. Or I feel unwell today. I'm not hungover. Have put nothing into my body except for food, water. Then therefore maybe I ate something bad, or I'm just coming down with a cold. So it just allows you to focus on what might come up in your life that is potentially not positive and address it easier. Perfect. Simplification. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Love
Chocolate,
that simplicity. Well, hey, chocolate's medicinal, dude.
Yeah, we'll go with that. There's this cookie place just by my apartment that has these small. It's fucked. It's open till like 4 a.m, and
oh no,
there's a moment in there's a moment in time, maybe once a week, where the nighttime version of me is out and about, and he's ready to fuck shit up. Yeah. And his determination of what he's going to do to fuck shit up is get a cookie at 3 a.m. Like that's the worst we're getting.
which is profoundly great, right? If the most damage you're doing to yourself is a cookie, you're fucking nailing it, dude. Nonetheless, it's interesting, isn't it? As we simplify, as we eliminate those unwholesome habits from our lives, we become more sensitive, right? So I guess Christmas would have been the last time I indulged in sugar, and I didn't enjoy it very much. You know? Like you're talking about Sadhguru, right? Saying like, I don't want to take the drug, it's going to make me feel worse. Right? With the sugar, it's kind of like there's a harshness to it for me these days. You know? It tastes refined. And it's like, yeah, my brain's lighting up, right? It's doing the thing, but I know there's a cost here.
Yeah, sure, for sure. My current spiritual challenge is getting to a state of bliss and peace in New York. I'm doing this on hard mode now. And I'm ready for it. I've been training my whole life for this moment, and I'm ready for it.
I love it. We need a Rocky montage.
Yeah. I mean, so far I'm getting beaten up, but we're making progress. It's only been 3 months. Need some time.
Okay, early days.
Yeah, very early days. You made a comment earlier about the chronic pain and chronic pain leading you into your spiritual practice. And during my research, I came across something called the Alexander technique, and you mentioned it before. I have no idea what the hell any of this is. I'd love to get your experience of what you were feeling pain-wise, how you came across the Alexander technique, what it is, how it impacted your life, and then ideally how somebody could potentially with similar problems implement that into their life.
Gotcha. Alexander technique is great stuff, and no one has heard of it. It's really, really niche.
So this is the gatekeeping. Not quite gatekeeping, but here we are. We found it.
We found it. Jackpot.
Yeah.
So the pain that I was experiencing was at its worst when I was at the drums. I'd been playing for 25 years, approaching the age of 30. 20 years. I'd been playing for 20 years, approaching the age of 30. And I had some bad habits, which, if you know anyone who uses their body for their profession, I'm not sure what other kind of work you've done in your life, brother, but a small bad habit for someone of that description can turn into a major issue after decades of using the body in that way. Coupled with that, all of the stress that I was creating in the mind was leading to a symptom of tension. And there was an epicenter for this tension. It was right in between my shoulder blades in my thoracic spine. Now, for 10 years, I had thought, I'm a drummer. Drummers have back pain. That's just how it is. So I'm just going to continue. Then I took a holiday in 2015 to Thailand for a friend's wedding. And it was the longest I'd been away from a drum kit since I was 11 years old. I had 2 weeks away from the kit. And I thought, this will sort me out. When I get back, I'll be fit as a fiddle. I'll be ready to go. I'll be free of this pain I've been experiencing for 10 years. Felt exactly the same when I got back. So at that point, I said, okay, I need help. So I went to see a chiropractor. Didn't have the money for it, but I just scraped the money together from somewhere and went to see a chiropractor. Imagine that, right? I couldn't afford to see a fucking chiropractor. Went to see her, and she said, Dan, there's nothing wrong with your spine. It's what you're doing with it that's causing you all this pain. And that was a paradigm shift moment for me. I know you're a Stephen Covey guy, so I can talk to you about paradigm shifts.
I'm all about them.
Yeah. Nothing was the same for me after I heard that. I said I didn't know I was doing anything with my back. I said, what do I do about it? She said, well, it's the doing that's causing you the problem, right? So this was the beginning of my journey into non-doing. Right? Yeah. Now she said, you can come and see me every fortnight. for the rest of your life, if you like. It'll be very expensive. I'll put you right. You'll go put yourself wrong again. I'll put you right again. You'll go put yourself wrong again, right? So she was adjusting me and I was finding some relief. But the problem was, again, me putting myself wrong in the way that I was using myself. She did some muscle testing on me and there was all kinds of crazy shit going on. She said, you can come and make me very rich, or you can go and see an Alexander Technique teacher and they will teach you how to stop putting yourself wrong. That's what she said. So I said, well, sounds like a no-brainer to me. So I went and I saw an Alexander Technique teacher and I had an experience in the first lesson that changed my life forever. In an Alexander Technique lesson, the teacher wants to interact with the students' thinking regarding how they're using their body. Now, that will usually begin with a conversation, but there is a hands-on element. The teacher will use their hands on the student's body, not to manipulate, but to suggest other ways of being, other ways of using the body. I changed dramatically in that first lesson, couldn't understand how it was possible that I was so different, just sat in a chair, but feeling like a different person. Because when we've been holding habitual tension for 10 years or more, that's part of our identity, man. Right? Central to this particular organization who trained me in Alexander Technique is the idea that thinking causes movement. This is confirmed by science. Now, I say it's central to the organization that I trained with because there are many organizations that train in Alexander Technique and some of them have other ideas. So I went down the rabbit hole. I had 20 lessons with that teacher. His name is Simon Gore, ITM. He's here in Bristol, UK, and he's an incredible teacher, one of the most skilled teachers I've ever come across in my life, as are many in that community. Then I went to a 8-day summer workshop and immersed myself in that work and came out a completely different person. There was less pain, yes, but there was also markedly less procrastination.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So it turns out that what we're developing when we study Alexander Technique is mental discipline. We have to develop mental discipline in a general sense in order to be able to inhibit those harmful habits that we're carrying out. And so then that increased mental discipline can be applied across all of your life. So I'd been procrastinating on listening to more talks by Alan Watts.
My boy.
Right? So I stopped doing that and then fell down the Alan Watts rabbit hole. Alan Watts led to Ram Dass and Ram Dass led to my first teacher.
Yeah.
So that was largely the shape of it. Now, Alexander was an interesting dude. Oh, incredible teacher, right?
The best.
We're so blessed to have such easy access to all these incredible teachers. Alexander was reciting Shakespeare in Australia at the beginning of the 20th century, and he was losing his voice. And he exhausted all of his options for therapy and then said to his doctor, could it be something I'm doing? And his doctor said, you better fucking hope so. So Alexander, being a determined individual, went and set up a bunch of mirrors in his study and started to watch himself as he recited Shakespeare. And then he started to watch himself when he was speaking normally. And he noticed some things that he was doing differently when he was reciting compared to when he was speaking normally. And then over a period of years, he observed and observed and observed and studied and practiced how to stop doing those things. Now, bearing in mind, he didn't know what he was looking for. He didn't know which of the things that he was doing were the ones that were causing him to lose his voice. So this was a long investigation, but he did in the end solve his problem. And he went back into the profession of reciting and all was well. And then other people started asking him, hey, I've got this problem. Can you help me with this? And the Alexander Technique was born. But the technique is not about the voice. It's not about Alexander's specific problem. It's not about my specific problem. It is about learning to inhibit harmful ways of using ourselves, especially where they've become habitual.
Can we do an example on air, do you think?
Sadly not, because almost every lesson involves that hands-on element. Also, I never actually qualified to teach. I went all the way through the course and then COVID hit.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
So
I'll have to look into it. That's
sadly
okay.
not. Do look into it. And when you look into it, and this is for our listeners as well, the organization that you want to look for is the interactive teaching method.
Mm-hmm.
That's the organization that I trained with, and they're the best, if you ask me.
Great. Well, I'll look into that down the line once I get off this call.
Great.
I think I'm always into understanding chronic pain, and I've suffered from a lot of chronic pain over the years, and I'm realizing more and more it is emotional, it is internal, and it's much less physical. So
yeah, if you can find an ITM
answers.
teacher, if you can find an ITM teacher in or around New York, I strongly recommend it, brother. I think you'd love it.
Great. I want to jump up because I'm conscious of time, but I want to talk about the business world and money and finances and wealth. You talk a lot about those various elements of life, and you seem to have a lot to say on it. So let's dig into that a little bit. With somebody wanting to build wealth, how does mindfulness help that end?
Well, first and foremost, it helps them by being unattached to the end, by being unattached to the result.
Does that make you work less hard?
It did for me in the beginning. The issue with this is that if your motivation is not deep and genuine and aligned, then it will make you work less. Yes.
Interesting.
So this manifested for me as the exit from my career as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was my life's purpose. I'm going to be the best drummer in the world. I'm going to play with the best artists in the world. And that's what I'm here to do. Well, what I discovered as I re-examined everything I thought I knew, dissolved those unconscious assumptions, beliefs, identities. I discovered actually there was a motivation that existed before I ever encountered music. And that was the motivation to understand myself and reality. As a young boy, I made many contemplations that are well documented in Buddhist literature. Right? Kids
just randomly.
Kids are naturally curious, right?
Yeah.
My earliest memories are of asking why, like in the broadest sense. Why?
Yeah.
Why any of this?
Yeah.
Right? This is the basic spiritual inquiry.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on here? Like,
yeah.
imagine you'd never been conscious and then one day you just come online. That's what it is to be 4 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Bizarre. Totally bizarre. And I had this awareness of how bizarre it was that any of this should be going on. And then when all the rules started to come on, then it was like, well, I mean, I haven't even answered the question of why any of this is going on at all. Can we stop with the fucking
stuff
school?
On top?
Yeah. Right? So that predated my passion for music by years and years and years. And so then slowly as I got to know myself in a way of speaking more and more deeply, that teenage dream of being a great musician dissolved. And what was left was that original motivation of self-understanding, the basic desire for well-being and understanding and knowing what's going on, right? Remind me of the question, brother.
It was the use of mindfulness into building wealth. So I guess the next question was, to follow up on what you were saying, how does understanding, getting to your depth of what you really want to do, which is understanding the world and existence, like how do you then make that into a career?
Yeah. So indeed, that actually became my career. Though it was, the reason that I was actually in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People examining for a whole year the question of what do I want? Central theme in this book, right? You need to have direction. You need to have a vision. You need to know what is it that you want people to say about you at your funeral, right? Well, I thought I knew the answer to that question for 20 years. And then abruptly I didn't. So that was quite alarming. And for a whole year, I wrestled with that question. I tried to answer it as an essay question. I tried answering it just in deep thought, in meditation. I tried answering it in conversation. No answer that I came up with, brother, felt substantial to me. I felt like I could write down a completely different answer in the next moment, and that was equally valid. So
how did you reconcile that?
I started, instead of trying to answer the question abstractly with thought, I started instead to look at my behavior. And the moment I did that, that was another paradigm shift, right? The moment I did that,
look at your behavior?
Obvious to me, looking at my behavior. Yeah, it became obvious to me.
What's an example?
Well, so I looked at what I was doing over the past day, week, month, year, and I was like, well, I meditated for 3 hours yesterday. Right? Does that tell me anything about what I want? Sure.
Yeah.
But the reason that I'd never written it down, the reason I'd never thought of that as a valid answer to the question is because my culture has no context for that being a valid answer to the question, what do I want? So I was thinking, well, I've made this career as a musician. What's my next career going to be? What's the next thing I can do that fits into the box of things one can do for a career? Right? Well, whether I liked it or not, it became clear to me that what I wanted was to first understand myself as deeply as possible and then to help others to do the same and to move all of us toward basic well-being. So then came a very difficult transition out of, or I suppose we could say out from under the wing of that first teacher of mine. Being a good Theravada Buddhist as he was dead against the involvement of money anywhere near any of these teachings that I'm talking about. Never mind the fact that there were other influences in the mix. Never mind the fact I just dropped 20 grand on a personal development course. It included the Buddha Dharma. Therefore, money must be nowhere near it. It was forbade. So, well, to cut a long story short, eventually I stopped speaking with that teacher because I saw I was going to benefit less people if I didn't build a business around all of my knowledge, not just the spirituality stuff, everything that I'd been able to learn. That was when I discovered our man Dan Coe online, who some of our listeners might be familiar with. Dan's across all socials, doing great work, teaching people how to build one-person businesses around what they care most about. So when I discovered that this was a possibility, that was another no-brainer moment for me, just like the Alexander technique was, just like the mindfulness was. Oh, not only can I build a business around what I care most about, actually, that's my best shot at ever achieving any kind of worldly success. Because that's where I'm going to work the hardest, naturally. That's where I'm going to want to get out of bed before 6 every morning and get straight to my desk and get to writing. Now, if I were I can't imagine even entertaining the idea of doing something that wasn't genuinely motivated and deeply motivated at this time in my life. It would be so incompatible. I don't know what I would do if I weren't doing this, honestly.
Probably a good place to be.
Yeah, I think so. It's like burn the bridges, right? No plan B. And what I've discovered is that indeed, in abiding in mindfulness, in being completely honest with myself at all times, that burns those bridges. It destroys the possibility of doing anything that's not deeply aligned. And it enables the greatest effectiveness that I've ever known. I'm more productive, I'm more effective than I've ever been anywhere else by a long shot. So that's how this helps us to earn money. And the money is just a consequence. The fuel is the wish to do good. And this is the case for any impactful personal brand. I wouldn't go so far as to say that no one can start a personal brand and just make a buck. I'm sure it can be done. But the ones that really resonate with people are fueled by a deep purpose. And it's the impact that comes first, and then the money follows.
Well, there's that saying that says, you want to make $1 billion, help 1 billion people, 1 billion and one in your case. So
yeah, so we're gonna have some nice net worth there at the end of this journey.
Hopefully, it's by the time you're still alive.
We'll see.
The well, you've spoken about the idea of free tiring yourself. What is that? What does it mean? And why is it important? How can somebody do it?
Yeah, so I coined the term freetirement to represent exiting one's current situation into this purpose-based business model, where you live like I do, running exactly the same schedule as you would if you were already financially free, but ahead of time, right? We see it time and time again. We've all heard the stories, right? Someone achieves financial freedom. They go to the beach. They sip margaritas for a couple of weeks, and then they're like, this is fucking boring.
Yeah.
Right? And then they come back to some kind of purpose-fueled adventure. Well, we're just bringing the purpose-fueled adventure forward, enabled by technology, right? This kind of business model just wasn't possible until 10 years ago with the really early adopters, right? Now it's the technologies are mature. We all feel safe doing business over social media, so everyone can join the race now and make a living doing basically anything. So whatever your deepest passion is, there's your new career. And so you don't have to save all your money, wait for retirement, do your 401k, do your index funds, scrape and save, deny yourself holidays, deny yourself time with family. You just don't have to do any of that anymore. There's a lot to learn, right? I've been on an 18-month learning spree since I started this business, but I want to do it. This is precisely what I would be doing if I already had that $1 billion in the bank. So what more could we want for ourselves? This is what freetirement is.
It sounds like an ideal that I think a lot of listeners would just shut off on as a not possible. So, or you'll get the comments of people saying, it's just trust funds, or you're living somewhere, but that's not my circumstance. Like, how do you respond to those considerations and feedback when you get them?
Well, I started with £3,000 in the bank, and I didn't invest all of that. I was desperately trying to hang on to it, in fact, as something of an emergency fund. My rent here in the UK is £1,100 a month. I split that with my wife. Cheap compared to New York, right? But that was difficult to afford on a musician's wage, so that's where I started. And I took $800 of that £3,000 and I invested it with my man, Dan Co. And I said, teach me. And what he taught me was the mechanics of social media, how attention works, how to talk about something which is valuable to others in such a way that they see that there's something of value there for them. And then from there on, we're into how entrepreneurship has always worked. We're talking about value exchange. Social media is just a new marketplace. Instead of taking our apples down to the town square, we're taking courses on mindfulness to the digital town square. That's really all it is. And then the economics just look like the more eyeballs you get, the more interested customers you're going to get. And I see people selling all kinds of things. People are selling courses on web design, graphic design. People are teaching others how to sell, how to market. People are teaching people how to shoot video, how to edit, or people are freelancing but on their own terms, not through an agency, no bosses anywhere to be seen, editing videos for other people, writing emails for other people, just using whatever skills they have currently. The learning curve is in how to package that existing knowledge and expertise in such a way that people understand that there's value there for them. And this was the major learning curve for me. How do I package this mindfulness thing in such a way that it even seems tangible to people? An entrepreneur in the States there said to an audience one time, the most valuable thing I have to give you is awakening, but I can't sell that to you because you don't know what it is. And the truth is, it isn't even an it, right? We can't package it up. So what I discovered was that the guarantee that I made, the promise I made to people who came through that first course that I launched, was that I will educate you. I made a promise of education, not a promise of you're going to get enlightened in 4 weeks, right? That's nonsense. I'm going to
enlighten in 4 weeks or your money back.
Right? I mean, I would be struggling if that was my guarantee. So I said, I will teach you how to start and continue a genuine spiritual practice. That was the guarantee that I made to people. And it turned out that I was attracting, I did all of my early work through X, through Twitter. That's by far where my largest audience is. Still a modest audience at 21,000 people. But it supports me. I talk about all of the stuff that we've been talking about here on today's episode on that timeline every single day. And I get enough dream clients come to me in the DMs that I don't even have to sell anything. People show up, they say, here's where I'm at. Can you help me? And I say, sure, I can. Let's hop on a call. Let's make sure we're a good fit. And then we go into a coaching arrangement. And because of the way a personal brand works, because I've been out there talking about what's most dear to me for 18 months, it's only dream clients that come to me because it's those people who are resonating with what I'm writing, right? So like I said, I'm attracting those people who are the perfect fit for the ways that I can help. Yeah. And that's how the economics of this works. The course that I took from Dan was called Digital Economics, all about how this works. And what I've then gone on to do is to see, well, hold on, okay, I mean, a lot of people have been successful through taking that course, but I moved particularly fast. It was within 5 months of enrolling on that course that I launched my first offer and got 10 grand in revenue over a weekend. So I was pretty happy with myself at that time. And that led me to feel confident. Okay, I can close my previous business. I also picked up a long-term coaching client through that period.
So what's the course called again? One more time. Dan Co's.
Yes, Digital Economics. So what I'm working on right now is something that fuses what I used to move through that material so quickly, which of course is all the mindfulness stuff. And that will all be packaged up in a course that I call Freetimement Frameworks. That will be dropping soon.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what was the, if you could distill the basics of what you learned from that course, what did it look like?
Yeah. Writing, a lot about writing, how to write for the busy attention marketplace in such a way that people don't just scroll past your stuff, right? And this comes down to it being about the reader. So many of us come to this whole discipline with our ideas in the way that we understand them. We talk a lot about the curse of knowledge. I actually teach alongside Dan now inside his courses. And we see all the time people coming through with this curse of knowledge. They understand, they know what they're talking about, right? So they head out onto social media and start speaking in terms that they understand, and people just scroll on by, right? What we need to do is we need to study. First of all, we need to acknowledge the vast majority of people that are ever going to see your content are beginners, because there's just more beginners of everything in the world, right? And then you need to speak about, this is the most important thing I ever learned from Dan. You need to speak about pains and benefits, pains that person is experiencing right now and benefits that person wants right now. So you want to get inside the head of that beginner. Now, here's where Dan's model gets really clever. Is he says the person that you're speaking to is your past self. This is, again, only possible due to these new economics, the way that social media works, the vast marketplace that we find ourselves in. Previously, you would have had to find a market and make an appeal to that market. You probably have had to twist what you're doing slightly to fit the market. Now, because there's 5 billion people logging onto social media every freaking day, there are enough of people in the position that we were 2, 3, 5 years ago that we just talk to that guy. And we know that guy very well. So I started making posts with past Dan in mind. I also used, because it was actually quite difficult for me to go back because I changed so much. I also had a student at that time who was really dedicated and experiencing a lot of the problems that I did previously. So I used his experience as well to get me into the mode of writing for past Dan, writing for that student who's not so far along. So when I'm writing a tweet these days, the first thing I'm thinking about is what kind of pain is that guy in and what does that guy want? And if I don't get one of those pains or benefits within the first 6 words, I consider it a bad tweet. And maybe I draft it and come back to it later. Okay. And then, of course, below I expand. This is actually the strategy for all social media content. If we're not making it clear to the viewer, the reader, that we're speaking for them, that we're writing for them, and that we can help them, they've got millions of options. So why are they going to hang around for more than 3 seconds? And that time that the creator has to hook the reader, the viewer, has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, right? 3 seconds now is maybe looking a little bit long. So it's all about that. Now, of course, come the time that someone has decided, I like what this person's saying, I think they can help me, they've hit the follow button, maybe they've even subscribed to your newsletter, this is where you can take them a little bit deeper. So in my newsletter, I write deep dives on all the subjects that we've been speaking about. Now I've got someone at a deeper level of interest. Now I can start to educate them. And in my newsletters, I educate these people to the point that they might be in a position where a service or a product of mine could be useful to them. Now, some people are going to come along and be ready for it immediately, right? These people do exist, but they're rare compared to the vast number of people who are, like I said, in that beginner state and need to understand what value is even here for me. So the newsletter or a YouTube video, any form of longer content serves as the opportunity for the creator to educate their audience. And then a certain number of people who read enough of those newsletters, who watch enough of those YouTube videos will go, yeah, wow, I actually trust this guy enough to get my credit card out. I'm going to buy that course. I'm going to buy that product. I'm going to sign up for some coaching. And that's how we make a living out here online. Really no different to how we make a living offline, just a whole lot easier and with no cap. There's no cap on how much we can earn out here. I'm at the beginning of this journey and I'm earning way more than I ever earned as a musician. So
good. Good luck for the next development. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's a substantial, because it's always difficult to really go into the practical, like what does that person need to hear who's skeptical? I was skeptical, man. I mean, I watched Dan's stuff and read Dan's stuff for months before I signed up for his deeper offerings. And this is the way it goes for most of us, right? We want to see that someone that we're considering investing in, spending money with, is genuine. Everyone's been burned, right? We've all heard the horror stories of people being scammed online, right? It's safer now than ever, but it can still happen. So I just watched Dan until I saw that his delivery and his ideas were consistent over a long enough period for me to say, yeah, this is a genuine dude. He actually wants to help people. he understands that helping people is actually how he's going to get rich, which is exactly what he's done. And that's the new business model that makes retirement possible.
Great. Have you read books on copywriting, or is your main development of your copy skills from the work you've done with Dan?
Yeah, by far the main development is from the work I've done with Dan and a lot of practice. I've read a little bit on copywriting here and there. I've read a bit of cash advertising, but I've not really gone deep down that rabbit hole.
Because the first thing that popped out when I was on your website was this guy's deep in the weeds of how to write effective copy.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, because I've read most of the copywriting books.
Right. Okay. Great.
Maybe that's why we're here. Maybe that's why we're here on the podcast, because of my cold email. My
it was a cold email, wasn't it? That we connected with?
I just randomly hit you up.
Yeah, there you go. So you got some copy chops too.
Nice. Well, it's good. It's good. Anyway, I love the direction it's going. I think you're doing something really great for the world, and I hope it works out really positively for you. But it sounds like it already has, but even more so. Of course, man. Of course. I had a few more questions, and then we can get out of here. What views do you have that would make most people either scratch their head or potentially get angry?
All you are is pure space, nothing else.
That's a good head scratcher, that one.
You and everyone you know can make better money than you are currently with the knowledge that's already in your head.
So it's a distribution issue?
Yeah. That if we can package and distribute that knowledge effectively online, then yeah, almost all of us will be earning more money than we are currently, with, again, that no cap where it can just grow and grow.
Yeah.
And bonus, you're only talking about that thing which you most care about. So that's, we've covered that one in great detail. I'm glad we got into it. Mainstream education is fucked. That's one that I really believe strongly. The fundamental delusion of which being that curiosity can be removed from the learning process. We can get kids through exams without curiosity being in the picture, but they will forget that information just as quickly as they possibly can. It's not learning.
It's
bastardization. Go ahead.
There's a funny story that I have about this exact thing. When I was in year 11, I had a chemistry teacher that was teaching chemistry, or maybe year 12, and he was a great teacher, and he was explaining a topic, and I said, "Oh, but why does that happen?" And then he elaborated further, and then I said, "Oh, and why does that happen?" And then he elaborated further, and I said, "Why does that happen?" And he goes, "It's just how it is." And I remember being taken aback by that moment, because in my head I was positive, I was curious, I was genuinely interested in understanding, and on reflection, luckily I didn't lose that curiosity in that moment. But a lot of kids potentially would. They would go, "Oh shit, no, I shouldn't do that again because I don't want to get in trouble." Lucky for me, I'm a little shit, so I didn't care. But the core lesson I took from it was that he said he defaulted to it. It's how it is when his knowledge ended, and there is more to it. He just didn't know, and he got defensive in that moment and tried to squash my curiosity because of his lack of knowledge.
This is a great demonstration of what's wrong with mainstream education. Terrible shame.
He's a great teacher, though. One of the better ones. So here's one of the good ones. That's the worst part.
Yeah. At least he gave you 2 rounds or 3 of genuine inquiry, right?
Yeah. And would it be okay for a teacher to turn around to a student and go, "You know what? I actually don't know"?
The good teachers, yes. That's
Probably
what a good
teaches
teacher
a
would
person
do.
Teaches a kid more about how to navigate the world than
100%.
than the defensiveness. But anyway, little side note, we could probably have another podcast episode just on the school thing.
Oh man, I could go for hours.
Yeah. We could do a round 2 soon. And
sure.
What's the biggest thing you've changed your mind on in the last 2 years?
Money is evil. Yeah, or that to say it more softly, because I'm not sure I was quite at money is evil, but that money should not be anywhere near spiritual teachings. It's just impractical. And as I touched upon earlier, what finally did it for me was I saw very clearly that I was going to benefit more people by involving money than I ever could hope to if I hadn't. And so it was like, well, is this about me and what I think about money, or is it about helping people? Well, once I saw it that clearly, it was a no-brainer.
Okay. And what's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Well, this may be a cop-out answer, but I think I would have to say my mother carrying me around for 9 months.
I was about to say, nope. That's the go-to answer for everyone. I'm not having it.
Everyone goes there. Hey, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, right?
No, I'm not letting that one go.
The kindest thing anyone's ever done for me, kind of stumped on that one, brother. The Alexander Technique community that I studied with, they hired me to broadcast the weekend training sessions because I couldn't afford the tuition fees. That was pretty kind.
That is very kind.
I was doing something for them in return, but they didn't have to hire me. So that was a good one. I'm sure there's more. I mean, that first teacher of mine spent hundreds of hours on Skype with me, and the most I was ever able to give him was a box of tea bags. He wouldn't even accept donations from me. His financial situation was taken care of. That was pretty kind.
Yeah.
That was pretty kind.
I mean, once you're at let's just say, if I'm at a point where I'm going to use the word post-economic, where I don't need to worry about any of these things, I don't think I would want to take money from people. But you got to put your own life jacket on first before you can do that for others.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we want to be able to reinvest as well, right? These goals that I have are not going to fund themselves.
Yeah.
So, I want to give hundreds of scholarships out for people who want to train people to homeschool their children with a well-being first model. Well, that money's got to come from somewhere, right? So money is a tool in the end.
Definitely. And when someone says they can't meditate because they can't shut their brain off, what do you say to them?
I say to them, it's not about shutting your brain off. It's about looking at what's going on, whatever that looks like, and learning to accept it. In the process of doing so, the mind will naturally calm. So we need to go about it indirectly, in other words. If we're trying to shut the brain down, we are indeed going to be frustrated.
Okay. Be like water. Flow with it.
Be like water. That's right, Bruce Lee.
Yeah, I love that. I think about that a lot.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Definitely. So is there anything you're excited about at the moment that you'd like to let the listeners in on?
Yes, I'm excited to drop this course that I briefly mentioned, Free Retirement Frameworks, in which I'll be fusing everything that we've been talking about today regarding spirituality and everything we've been talking about today regarding business as the comprehensive solution to how I was able to free tire myself so quickly after I decided to try. That really was the secret weapon for me, and how I was able to educate myself on how online business works so quickly. This will be a series of 4 cohort courses, which will run probably over the span of a year. I'm not sure how quickly I'll be able to get through them, or indeed how quickly it would be wise to get through them. I may need to give people some breathing space in between the course dates. We'll see how it goes. But that's what I'm most excited about right now.
Great. Just a note, I did a Tony Robbins seminar a while ago, and he mentioned the best way to learn something is through intense study over a short period of time. So maybe just as an idea, focus and intensity and commitment, a high level of commitment might be better off to get the basics down pat than spreading it out too long.
Good to keep in mind. Thank you, brother. Yeah, I could just run them through the gauntlet.
Run them through the gauntlet.
Yeah.
And they'll learn a lot.
I'm sure they would. The difficulty that we find running these courses, I've had the benefit of observing how Dan does things, working with him, is precisely the commitment part. Because we're remote, it's kind of difficult to say to people, hey, you got to be at your computer 6 hours a day and I'm going to slap you upside the head if you're not. We don't have that luxury, right? You can say, hey, this is going to require a large degree of commitment. But I see Dan's stuff working. So he's got a model there that works for that remote work. But I'll definitely consider, brother, because, man, I'm certainly keen on the idea of immersion. I love immersion. I think it's incredibly powerful. So one thing I'm considering just now as we speak is perhaps I could run some weekend 1 day or 2 day events where we cram a bunch in on those weekend days, and then the week maybe is a little bit more relaxed as they go about and do their work, etc. Yeah, you got me thinking, brother.
That's what I'm here for. And where can people find you if they're interested in learning more?
dangoldfield.com. That's got links to all my socials. You can sign up for my newsletter there where you'll hear about everything that's coming up. I'd love to hear from you.
Great. And my last question for the day is, what is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life, brother. The meaning of life is actually whatever we decide it is. Now, that may sound, again, like another cop-out answer. That may sound like low-hanging fruit. However, I'll back it up by saying that meaning is contrived. Meaning is something that we generate with the thinking mind. So meaning is whatever someone decides it is in a moment, and it can change in the next moment.
So what are you deciding in this moment?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't. That's the
you
beauty
choose
of
not
these.
to.
yeah, that's the beauty of these practices we've been talking about, right? Is you can just opt out, right? Ram Dass said, "The thinking mind is a wonderful servant, but a lousy master." Right? So wouldn't it be great if we can just say, "Well, I don't need things to have meaning. They're just what they are." Now, someone from the outside may observe and say, oh, well, it looks like to Dan, the meaning of life is to be online and help people and figure out this mission of helping 1,000,000,001 people and all of that. Well, yeah, we could say that.
At this moment,
but I'm not really thinking about that as I go about all of this stuff. Right? So as far as meaning goes, I would say that's something that the thinking mind does, and it turns out to just not be that important.
Well, we are meaning-generating machines, after all.
Well, indeed, and we're very good at it, and we tie ourselves up in knots with it. For that whole year-long period of considering Covey's question of what do I want, I was feeling like my life used to have so much meaning when I was a young, ambitious teenager going after music. And now I feel like because I have no ambition, my life is meaningless. But actually, my life was full of meaning from another perspective at that time, because I was doing all of this deep study, deep meditation, deep practices, learning how to teach Alexander technique, learning how to teach mindfulness. So it's down to interpretation in the end.
Sure. Different seasons for different things, right? And you bring all the experiences together as you go along.
That's right.
Until your memory gives out. Yeah, and then none of it matters.
I'll see you in the old people's home, bro.
Yeah, I love it. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your energy. This has been a wonderful conversation. It's very challenging to really connect via a screen, but I can feel your calming presence through this conversation. So I appreciate you.
That's beautiful, brother. I appreciate you too. Thank you for all of your thoughtful questions. You've been a great host, man.
I'm glad to hear. Now, on the last bit, anyone listening, like, subscribe, give it a rating. It helps us a lot. And we'll see you next time.